I'm Haze Hartwig. This is Bamboo, Vancouver's property management and investment podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Bamboo, Vancouver's property management and investment podcast. I'm Haze. Today we have Peter back on the show. We're going to be covering the stats and the general goings-on in Greater Vancouver. So welcome back from the VRI club there, Peter. What's going on?
Thank you. Yeah. Excited to be back again for another month of stats.
The
hard-hitting stats. So it's good to keep everybody updated on what's been going on and maybe swap a couple stories about what we've been up to.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess we were talking prior to the show that there is significantly more properties on the market this time of year than there was the same time last year. Kind of interesting. So it sort of seems, as you were saying, a little bit stagnant. The average price for a one furnished and unfurnished one bedroom in Greater Vancouver is barely any change and actually decreased by an entire $9 from April. So, I mean, those are mad savings. Don't spend them all in one place. So the current average sits at $2,367, which is $49 more than last year. So kind of running the same sort of prices, give or take, from last year. Have you been noticing, how have your listings been going? Have you noticed some stagnation or what?
For sure. Yeah, I've got a couple listings that have kind of just been sitting around and we've reduced the price a little bit. I've received a couple more inquiries, but it definitely hasn't been, let's put it this way. Often when I schedule showings, I'd like to schedule like 5 or 6 for the same unit all in a row. You know, 5:10, 5:20, 5:30 p.m., so on, so on. I've been barely able to get 3 in a row.
Really?
Yeah. For some of the listings, there's been a couple downtown that have gone much quicker, but there's been some. I've got this one in Brentwood right now that is like one of 5,000 identical units.
I've got one in the same building as you. I just picked it up.
That one is killing me. So that one's tough. I think I've done like 1 or 2 showings for that one. So
yeah,
it's there's some areas that you can definitely feel the stagnation. People are still, obviously clients are still looking for higher prices, but there's so many options on the market right now that tenants they're able to be super picky.
Actually, it's funny that since we've got one each in the same building out there, I forget the name of the building right now.
Hillside.
That's on Low Heat, right?
Yeah.
With the nice patios and whatnot.
Yeah.
In roof heating. Yeah, which is they're pretty cool.
Yeah,
to be perfectly honest.
They've got the unit that I've got on by all accounts is it's got a great view, obviously, as most of those towers at Brentwood all do, right? They all have really good views. It's not a bad unit, I think, but it's just getting absolutely drowned out by the number
of so many of them.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those buildings. I think there's 4 buildings all right in a row, and they're all identical. They're obviously like 70% of those units are all being rented out.
Yeah.
And they're all being rented out right now. So it's tough. Right now we're offering it for like the first month free. To try and get more people in there, but it's been slow for sure.
It's interesting because like these are one of the times that I'm saying when there's a bunch of the exact same unit for the brand new buildings that come out, it's really difficult to market it because what's my advantage? You and I have got the same unit in the same building, different floor. So what's the advantage? I guess it's going to come down generally to a race to the bottom on pricing. But one of the things that I was actually debating about doing is there's some AI staging, which I'm kind of thinking to give this a crack because maybe help people sort of visualize what's going on, because a lot of people can't figure out where their couch is going to go. Some of these have a pillar in it as well, which makes it real tricky, right?
Yeah.
So,
and none of the units that are up for rent right now, most of them don't have furniture in them.
Yeah,
right?
Of course,
obviously
brand
new. So there's no, and most people wouldn't have staged them or something like that for the purposes of rental. So I totally agree. When you scroll through on Craigslist in that area, there's like 85 identical units, right. And they're all, there's only so many ways you can describe a 2-bedroom condo to make it sound exciting and fun and awesome and all these great things. You're right. It is very difficult to differentiate. I've been trying to, pulling out all the stops, all the different websites that we usually use, And still the competition is fierce in that area.
Right. So hopefully it's not a race to the bottom, but we'll see how this goes, because there might be some upset owners.
Yeah, to be honest, that this is an owner that I was talking to back in last year, at the end of last year, about this unit before it completed, I think in maybe February or March.
Yeah.
And I said the same thing. I said, honestly, Brentwood's super saturated already. I said, there's so many of these new units coming in or completing, so many of these new buildings completing. Yeah. And so many of the owners end up renting them out. Like they're buildings that not a lot of owners live in.
Yeah.
Some majority renters. So when you get your keys, 80 other people are getting their keys at the same time, and they're all renting it.
Exactly.
They're all renting it out. So,
which is actually a great segue to the average rent per square foot is $3.18 for Greater Vancouver as a whole, with the top three being Vancouver proper at $3.87, Burnaby in second with $3.57, and North Vancouver being at $3.42. Oddly, because there's these brand new buildings we're just talking about, that's sure as hell what's pushing up that price per square foot in Burnaby, since all the people are trying to catch up from when the rates were a lot lower when the original push.
For sure. I mean, I'd imagine a bunch of these people also started, thinking about these properties and thinking, I can get $3,800, $4,000 for these 2-bedroom units when the market was maybe looking a little bit hotter. I mean, that's still a bit of an overestimation, but it's, a bit closer than it was. But now, I've got mine listed for $3,400 right now, and that's definitely at the top end of the 2-bedroom units in that building.
Yeah, are you the 2 and den or just 2?
Just 2.
Just 2. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
I haven't priced mine yet, so
we're competing directly here.
Reading your book, man. We'll see you. Loser has to buy beer.
Exactly.
That's the rule, man. So it's funny with the price per square foot. Obviously, in this building, because they're all the same, you could probably use price per square foot. Otherwise, what are some of the things that you take into account when you're pricing out your units under a normal circumstances, or even in this circumstance? How are you gauging where to come in at?
I really just look at the other units. I mean, to be honest, look, both you and I, we've rented out tons of units, and we know when somebody steps into a unit, or renter, when they step into a unit, what they will nitpick at, or what they will notice, or what they'll say, I don't really like that. Mm-hmm. You talked about it earlier, the pillar in the middle of the living room.
That's going to be
that's a difficult one sometimes. People really don't like that, and I totally agree. It makes it difficult to put the couch in certain places. It blocks the view a little bit. It does mess up the feng shui of the whole room. So that is one thing, a pillar. And obviously we're not saying like, if there's a pillar, you got to take $50 a month off the rent. It's not like a 1-to-1 or you can't directly, there's no formula for it necessarily, but it's definitely things when a tenant walks in, they'll go, there's a pillar in the middle of the room. Don't like that as much.
Yeah.
And if there's another unit that is the same price as yours, but it doesn't have the pillar, then that may be the difference maker.
Exactly.
Another thing that we're starting to get into is it's getting really hot out. Not necessarily the market, but temperature-wise in Vancouver. And when people walk into a unit, they want to make sure there's air conditioning, because if it's 30 degrees outside, it better be nice and cool in the unit. Doing showings of unair conditioned units in the summer can be really difficult. Even you might think like, the sun's out, it's so bright, it looks so nice in here, and then you open up the doors and you get hit by a wave of heat in the face. Tenants definitely notice that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to rent out places with no air conditioning in the winter when it's cold, because nobody's thinking about it. So that's another thing as well. These kind of little, obviously the parking spot, if it has a parking spot or not, that's pretty standard these days. But those kind of more, pillar in the unit, air conditioning, these kind of like smaller things can make a big difference between $3,300 or $3,400 or $3,500 and $3,200. So
that's why in the winters or in the summer, I generally wear darker clothes, because when I first started, I was doing some showings, wearing the dress shirt, all that stuff, and just sweating like a pig. And I got my hairy white dude. So I was sweating through my shirt, trying to be professional, kind of giving a wet t-shirt show. Like, this is not working. So now dark clothes for me for all summer showings.
Yeah, 100%. I also usually try and get to the showing. If it's like a vacant unit, I try and get to the showing a little bit
there.
earlier, like 10 minutes early, just to open some of the windows, get some air flowing in there. Because some of these units, if nobody's living in them, they just absolutely bake. And closing the blinds when I'm done, so that the next time I'm there, it hasn't been greenhoused all day long. I've 100% done showings where I think the people would have rented it if it wasn't 30 degrees outside. Like I 100% gone through. I remember one that I did last year. I did like 6 showings in a row, and like 3 of the people were like, we love the unit. And then later on, they got back to me and were like, honestly, it was just so hot in there. I don't think I could do it. And I'm like, if this was December, they wouldn't have even thought about it, and they would have moved in.
Yeah, right.
And they would have found out later that, yes, the unit does get hot. But then at that point, they were already living there, and it would have just been a fact of life.
They're just more comfortable.
Exactly. Yeah. So definitely is something to consider when you're doing pricing as well as when you're doing showings.
Yeah, absolutely. So as usual, most active type of listing is the condos at 73%. With the even spread between the 1 and 2 bedroom units, you've been noticing, obviously, you just mentioned that there's a heap of condos out there in Brentwood right now. Have you been noticing any differences in the type of condos that you've been picking up? Are you getting more 1s these days, more 2s?
Still about an even mix. I think the 1 and 2 bedrooms definitely pretty even. I haven't noticed a ton more of either of them. Yeah. We've talked about it a bunch of times, but the Airbnb units, all of those are coming onto the market, and those are a mix too, right? You see lots of 1 bedroom ones, but you also see a lot of 2 bedrooms as well. I've seen tons of different ones. Also seen some basement suites as well that people are trying to convert from Airbnbs as well. Yeah. Still the condos for sure are the most prominent.
That's actually a pretty stellar segue. So thanks, Peter. Live.Rent has reported on their stats that the furnished units saw a higher increase than the unfurnished so far this year. No duh. However, what are your thoughts on all these furnished units coming onto the market? Have you noticed an uptick on them? Do you find that the owners are leaving them furnished still, or are they saying, I will unfurnish them? Or have you seen any, are they just like, stay in the course and furnished? Too bad.
For a long-term rental, I always advise unfurnished 100%. Nobody wants to, nobody wants to sleep in the bed that, 500 happy guests on Airbnb slept in, right, or sit on the couch that 500 happy Airbnb guests sat on. Honestly, furniture is a super personal thing. And a lot of this furniture is, cheaper IKEA stuff that people, just used in an Airbnb. Yeah. So it's not something super nice or tasteful anyways.
Yeah, fair enough.
So in my opinion, the unfurnished is the way to go. Not surprisingly, though, lots of people want to keep their furniture or keep the furniture in the unit when they rent it out.
It's a pain in the ass to move.
Because it's a pain to move. You got to get rid of it somehow.
Yeah.
And if you're going to sell it on Facebook Marketplace or something like that, you're getting pennies on the dollar. So I totally understand why people don't want to. I always recommend, hey, don't go out right now and get rid of all the furniture, but be flexible. Somebody might come in and say, I love the couch, I love the dining room table, but I have my own Tempur-Pedic sleep number bed that I need to sleep in. Can we get rid of that? And then you get rid of that. So that's what I always say. It's not the worst thing in the world just to keep some furniture in there anyways while you're doing the showings, as long as it's not too egregious or gross or anything like that. But at the end of the day, you got to be flexible, in my opinion, to succeed in this game.
Now, you're normally the one who's answering the emails that come in from Vancouver Rent-It that they want to rent with us, and that, are you seeing an uptick in furnished units on that side as well?
For sure. Yeah. And it makes sense. All these people are converting from the short-term rentals into long-term rentals. Yeah. They've got all these furnished units. They don't really want to unfurnish them. A lot of people are willing to eventually unfurnish it once they realize that there's a much smaller market. What I always tell people is that if you have an unfurnished unit and if somebody comes to see it, they only have to like the unit. If you have a furnished unit, they have to like the unit and they have to like your furniture.
Yeah. So there's an extra call.
It's just one more thing that they have to like.
Yeah, absolutely.
And going back to what we were talking about earlier, there's so many units available right now that people can choose to be super picky.
Yeah.
Right. A couple of years ago when I was, or maybe even last year when I was doing showings, I'd have 7 to 8 people lined up. I could have my pick of the litter, choose whoever I wanted to. So many different tenants looking at, at a smaller number of places. But nowadays, there's tenants and they're looking at so many different places and they can decide, I hated the couch in that place. I will never want to sit on that couch ever. Yeah. And then they just won't choose your unit.
Yeah, that was one of the ones that I was having a problem. I've got it rented now, but when I was trying to price out our furnished townhome downtown in Yaletown, I went to do the comparables and they were ranging from $4,000 to $14,000 for 2-bedroom townhomes. I'm like, how in the world are we supposed to price this out right now? Because the competition is so wide.
For sure.
So I think it'll kind of dial down a bit now that we're getting past the initial shock, and we'll start to see where we're at. But it's tricky because with Craigslist, you don't see what the rented price is. You see what the asking price is. So it's really difficult to try to gauge that, basically.
Yeah, especially on Craigslist, I always find it super telling, and I relay this to my clients. I find it super telling when it says, the price is this. The listing has been up for 3 months and it was updated yesterday. Yeah. It means that the person is still actively trying to rent it. They're clicking renew on the ad every 3 days, but it's been up for 3 months.
Yeah.
That means that they've probably lowered the price a bunch of times. It probably means they still need to lower the price.
Absolutely.
And it certainly means that it's not rented yet at that price. So it can be very misleading. There's definitely tons of ads on there that are people shooting for the stars. In terms of pricing, and it's just not feasible for them to rent it out at that price, but they don't quite know that yet. So.
Yeah, absolutely. With that, now, do you figure that the owners that aren't getting the prices that they want, do you think that they're going to adjust down for the pricing, or do you think they're just going to hang it up and sell it? Like, have you had any owners that are just, hey, it's not renting right now? Mind you, it's only been a couple weeks into May here. Yeah. So
I definitely have a mix of people where some people are really okay with just waiting, right? Mm-hmm. Some people get really hung up on the price of, an extra $100 or an extra $200, and they're like, I'll just wait. Yeah. Like 1 month, wait 2 months, wait 3 months. I'm like,
it's chasing math.
Losing a lot of money there. Like it doesn't really matter that much if you drop the price by $100 or $200. Maybe it's like a point of pride. I rented my place for this much. It's this valuable. It's worth this much. But at the end of the day, cash flow is king. If you can just get a great tenant in there paying rent each month, even if it's $100 or $200 lower, in my opinion, personally, that's the better option. Yeah. But I don't doubt that we will have some people reaching out to you, hopefully, to sell, because the carrying cost of holding on to this unit is just too low the carrying cost is too high when they, can't rent it out for the price that they want.
Yeah. So the switch from Airbnb or short-term rental to long-term rental, it's a big hop. Like really big.
Airbnb, you're renting it out for what, $200 a night? That's $6,000 a month. Yeah, right, for like a 1-bedroom unit. Absolutely. Right? I think it'd probably be hard to find. I don't really know what the prices of Airbnbs in Vancouver are necessarily, because I don't need to rent any. But I'd imagine like $200 for a 1-bedroom downtown would be pretty good, actually. That's probably a pretty good price.
I imagine it's cheap. It's more.
Yeah, it's probably more than that. So that, even then, that's $6,000 a month if you have somebody all the time. Yeah. Right? There's no way you're getting close to $6,000 a month. No, you're more at like $2,500. So like less than half. So I think there's a lot of people that are taking huge losses and are probably trying to sell right now.
Absolutely. We don't really have a good segue for it, but the rules have changed. We talked on a previous show last month about some of the incoming rules brought to me by David Eby. See, I learned how to pronounce it right. But the rule for owner occupancy has now been updated to 12 months for occupancy from 6, which is official now. It's on the RTB website, all that stuff. So any of our DIY landlords listening, just be aware of that. Just because some people are trying to, move in to get the higher rent after 6 months, that type of trip. So
has to be 12 months, a full year.
Yeah, absolutely. Which they've done that to close that loophole for questionable evictions, which makes sense to me. I mean, generally, you touched on it, that if you're not doing anything dodgy, it's not going to affect you. But
exactly. I mean, there's no real reason that somebody, if they can't move in for 6 months, they can't move in for 12. I'm sure there's some edge cases, but rules like this, so there's always going to be some people who are not happy with it. or some cases where it quite doesn't quite work for the person, but it is what it is.
Yeah, for sure. So BC holds the top 4 most expensive cities in Canada.
Ooh.
Yeah, we're back. Markham's in 5th. So number 1 through 4, it's West Van, North Van, Vancouver, and Burnaby. Burnaby's always banging with the...
Burnaby's always
new
up there. Yeah, absolutely. Every time I drive by Brentwood, there's just more towers.
Yeah, more towers and more cranes.
Exactly.
So
yeah,
it's always going there. But touching a bit on that, since we both got one in that same building, are you guys allowing for pets?
No.
See, that's I'm trying to get our guys to allow for pets. Just as something, as you said, to differentiate yourself.
100%. I totally agree. Allowing pets has worked for me before for some units. Especially, I mean, there's no carpet in the unit, right? It's all laminate floors. I personally would say pets, no problem. But yeah.
Didn't you have a bit of a run-in with pets recently? No.
I've been good on pets, luckily. Yeah.
I've had an interesting run-in today with damage deposits. Somehow, one of our tenants knocked a hole through the bathtub, and I can't figure out how this happened. I'm waiting for the reply on the email, but I mean that's going to be a tough fix because you can't just patch a bathtub. So
I mean, maybe you can, but
it'd be ill-advised.
Yeah. I have seen some stuff about fixing like porcelain sinks with ramen noodles.
I don't think we'll be doing that. So yeah.
I actually have had a pet thing recently. I've got a unit, a very nice unit downtown, and somebody reached out and they had 4 animals, four dogs.
Okay.
And I said, okay, interesting. And they said they have 4 service dogs. I said, well, I need 4. Seems like a lot of service dogs.
That's a lot of service.
And then they were 4 Dachshunds. And I thought, 4 Dachshunds. First of all, I mean, I don't really know much about service dogs and stuff like that, but I wouldn't think that little Dachshunds would be the best service dogs. Right. And I don't think that 4 of them would do much good unless they're carrying somebody somewhere all together or something like that. But I have no idea. But anyways, I thought that was interesting. We have people do reach out with service dogs and stuff like that. But that's kind of a different thing from pets. Not allowed to take a security deposit or a pet deposit.
Yeah.
So that's something different for owners to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. Other people who don't have service dogs as well, if it's just a pet, most buildings have a restriction on the amount of pets as well. Usually it's 2 dogs if they allow for dogs.
Yeah, usually.
So do be aware of that if you're a tenant or a landlord for that matter. Make sure you check those bylaws, because if you roll into a place with 4 dogs and the bylaws are only 2, you know the building's going to hit you like every week with like a fine.
$200 fine.
Yeah, and I mean that's going to stack up real fast. And I mean in this case with the 4 Dachshunds, it's pretty noticeable. Somebody rolling with 4, like that's a crew.
Yeah, that's a crew of dogs right. For sure. Yeah, actually, that's a really good point. A lot of buildings are like 1 dog and 1 cat, or 2 dogs if they are under 35 centimeters from the neck down. And there's a lot of really obscure measurements and stuff like that.
It's funny too, actually, with the measurements as well, because a lot of them say from the dog's shoulder down, which is funny because a lot of people measure from the wrong side and they actually measure from the withers. So the withers is like where the top of their head meets the body.
Yeah.
But the shoulder is actually below the head.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because you see some of them that are, say, up to 2 feet or 60 centimeters at the shoulder. That's a big ass dog. If it's
from the shoulder, yeah.
Yeah, like that's really tall.
It's like a really big dog. Usually dogs are more long. They're more long than like tall like that.
Yeah, it's funny. The ones that always get me is the weight. It's like, well, what if you got a fat dog?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, I think they're trying to like gauge it more for like the meatier, big monster dogs. But
yeah,
I understand that.
There's a lot of ones about aggressive breeds too. Like the city of Vancouver, I think, has like a list of what they consider aggressive breeds, and there's a lot of buildings or stratas that use that aggressive breed list to restrict dogs. So
yeah, interesting enough, New West sort of does that, but they essentially, if your dog has been registered that it attacked something or somebody, then they consider that. But otherwise, they don't really have a breed
So it actually has to be an aggressive dog as opposed to just an aggressive breed.
Yeah, which I think is a lot more fair.
It's totally way more fair. Yeah, of course.
I mean, there's a lot of dogs that get just a bad rap.
Rap.
Whereas a Dachshund, for instance, they're nipping at things all the time, but nobody reports.
Just smaller chompers. Yeah,
exactly right. So yeah, that's a whole pet thing to get into, and the last thing I need is PETA calling me and all that. And so we'll leave that there so we don't get in trouble.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Great. So I guess that's pretty much covering what we got for today. If anyone's trying to get a hold of you, what's the best way to find you and to complain about dogs?
Yeah, you can find us at VancouverRent-It.com. Just Google Vancouver Rent-It and we'll be right there, and you can give us a call or send us an email.
Wicked. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show there, Peter. My name's Haze. This has been Bamboo, Vancouver's property management and investment podcast.